Hey, Brimp, Stephen Godani, topvelocity.net. And this is the Top Velocity hashtag pitching tips show, where you send us questions and we answer your questions on anything pitching or anything we do here at Top Velocity. So if you don't know how to do this already, go to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, put at Top Velocity, hashtag pitching tips, or at Stephen Godani, hashtag pitching tips, and ask us your questions and we're gonna answer it on the show. So what's the question for today?
Players Only in Corporate ask, how much does relative hip position affect torsion? And can you have poor relative hip position with adequate torsion?
Okay, remember the second part. So the first part, yes, hip position does affect torsion. So what is torsion again? That's the knee, the drive leg knee, staying externally rotated as you move the hips forward and you pull the force vector of the ankle to knee in a linear position. So as that ankle to knee is going in a linear position, we want to make sure that we're keeping the knee out in torsion. So how does hip position affect that? Is you'll notice if my hips counter rotate or they turn and I show my back pocket to the catcher, then that actually supports external rotation. So it actually supports torsion. That's why you'll see guys, a lot of high velocity pitchers do that. Chapman does that. He's a great example of it. So lifting and turning your butt more closed and closing that hip position actually twists the knee out and creates that good torsion. So if I don't do that, it's just gonna be harder to get torsion. Now, if I have really good external rotation, really good abduction flexibility in my hip, I might not need to counter rotate my hip, but you can play with that. Sometimes really counter rotating your hip turns your knee out into torsion and it holds that position. So yeah, hip position does affect torsion. It actually supports it if we counter rotate or close off a little bit more as we move down into that linear position. What was the second part?
Can you have poor relative hip position with adequate torsion?
Oh, I guess I kind of answered that. So yeah, if I don't have good hip position, so say if I don't counter rotate, I leave my hips just, in line with the target, not open, closed in line, then I need to have good external rotation of the hip of joint and good abduction of the hip joint. So it's just gonna mean I need to have more hip mobility. So if I don't have great hip mobility, or it's not even I don't have great hip mobility, it's just maybe I want to support more torsion, that's putting that counter rotation in your hips will do that. But if not, it's just gonna mean you need to have more hip mobility. Good example, if you watch Kershaw, he's a good example of a guy who doesn't have great counter rotation. Remember, how he lifts, puts down, and then he moves straight to the target. And he also, on top of that, he throws his front leg wide open pretty early. Okay, most guys, that would kill them because what would happen, they'd throw their front leg open and their back leg would collapse because most guys don't have Kershaw mobility, which is Kershaw throws the front leg open and that knee stays in torsion. It means he has insane abduction, external rotation, mobility in his hips to be able to do that movement. So I would not even recommend you doing a Kershaw delivery as far as following him opening his hips without opening his front leg without counter rotating his hips, because I don't see a lot of guys that come through here have that kind of mobility in the hip to be able to hold torsion like he does, because he still, even though his front leg's wide open, he still holds torsion in that back leg and to the last minute, and then he drives and everything internal rotates and goes. So good question. That's a really good question. So if you don't feel like you have great hip mobility, you're going to have to support torsion with more counter rotation in the hips. You got anything?
Nailed it.
All right. So if you got a question for us, go to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at Top Velocity, at Stephen Godani, hashtag pitching tips, and ask your question, and we're going to answer it on the next show.
Play hard, work hard, play hard, work hard, play hard, work hard, play hard.